Good afternoon. I wanted to share a story with you about my experience working at the Federal Reserve Bank in Chicago. I'm calling it Tales from the Sweet Brook, Chicago, Messenger at the Fed. When I went to Chicago in the middle of the summer of 1966, I needed some work, and my brother-in-law Ken suggested I apply at the Federal Reserve Bank since they hired Moody Bible Institute students, and he had been a student there and had worked there when he was a student. So I went and applied for a job, and I got a job as messenger. I was 21 years old, and I was going to be a messenger for the Federal Reserve Bank, which meant I would deliver on foot to various places in the Loop, downtown Chicago, places like the Board of Trade, the Chicago Board of Education, Continental Illinois, First National Bank, and other similar places. So I got hired to do that. My job was to deliver securities to these different places. Now, I had either a briefcase or a suitcase with the securities in it. Normally, it was chained to my belt, and if I had over $1 million, I would, in securities, I would have one guard. Over $2 million, I have two guards. Less than that, I would go by myself. Now think about it for a little bit. You see this man, a young man, walking downtown with a guard or two, with a suitcase chained to his belt. It looks a little suspicious, doesn't it? Kind of reminds you of the stories you see in the movies. Well, sure enough, it was strange. And the guards had a sense of humor, and one of the things one of the guards liked to say was, well, we've been told that if somebody tries to grab your suitcase, the best thing is just to shoot you. It's very hard to get a suitcase away from a dead body. Thanks a lot. Of course, they were just giving me a hard time, and that never happened, and I don't think it ever would have happened. They wouldn't want to be guilty of murder. But that was interesting. So we would go to all these different places downtown, and one of the fun things was we learned to explore where the good coffee spots were. And of course, the guards knew where all the good coffee spots were, especially with donuts. And one of my favorites was this one here. It was the Mayflower Coffee Shop. It was in the lower level of one of the big skyscrapers on the main floor. And the symbol of it said, "As you ramble on through life, brother, whatever be your goal, keep your eye up on the donut and not up on the hole." Well, I learned to try to keep my eye up on the donut and not the hole. I bought this later. I did not steal it from the coffee shop. I just wanted to make that clear to you. But that was an interesting experience those months I worked down there, and I got to eat in the cafeteria there. They had good food. We had a couple of Polish cooks who did not speak English. They were very nice ladies, but I couldn't communicate with them. And if I didn't keep my hand on my plate, they thought I was done and they would take it. And I didn't want to lose half my meal. So I learned from that point on to sit with my hand on the plate and hold it down so they wouldn't take it. Later on, my job was to work in the mail room at midnight shift. So I did that, worked in the mail room, and then sometimes I was filing checks into the various banks that were in that Federal Reserve District. I got to watch as they were building the First National Bank skyscraper and doing the pilings down to bedrock. I got to observe the dedication of the Picasso at the Civic Center. I got to ride the L train to and from work. That was an experience in itself, and it would jerk to a stop. People would be reading their newspapers, and I found the Chicago Sun-Times was a tabloid edition, so it was better to read that than the Tribune, because the Tribune was a big full-page one, and it was hard to read that. We had various kind of interesting things happen while I was there, and I remember a couple of funny incidents. One was I was walking downtown Chicago, and I was, I guess, singing to myself, probably a gospel song or chorus, and I had my keys in my hand on a chain, and there was a little pocket knife attached to it. Somebody had reported to the Chicago police officer that there was this man that was mumbling to himself, carrying a knife. So I got pulled over into one of the stores in the downtown area, and that was kind of interesting. I got frisked. I'd never been frisked before. When he saw my pocket knife was probably not sharp enough to cut more than butter, and it was only about 1.5 inches long, and I was singing Christian songs, he said, "Oh, forget it, go ahead." Well, that was an interesting experience, and you never know what kind of interesting experiences you're going to have when you're in downtown Chicago. For a Southern Illinois song of farm boy, this was an interesting experience to say the least. And I'm glad I had the experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was a lot of fun those days in downtown Chicago. Have a great day.